Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. My name is Deborah Hatswell, and you're listening to BBR Investigations. And tonight, I have a treat for you. Lee Solway has joined me from the Supernatural podcast, and he's going to share his experience with a sheep squatch in Hampshire and some of his experiences with the Fae when he was much younger. I know that you'll enjoy it. And if you're interested in those kind of subjects, pop across and see his podcast. The link is in the description below.
Do you know what, right? Because people call it goat man, people call it deer man. Yeah. Around our area, I've had maybe 5 or 6 different people tell me about a deer man. And then I've also heard it called sheep man. Yeah. And now I've seen it. It's all 3 of them. It's the eye of the beholder type thing. It's well, I'll just briefly tell you what happened. I mean, it was only a brief encounter anyway, because it was your typical British rural road, woods on both sides, and it's one of those roads where the road meets the forest. It literally, you might have 4 inches of after the white line, you might have 4 inches of tarmac before you're in the forest. And it dropped off. The road on both sides dropped off, and it's probably only, maybe the road was, let's say, a foot higher than the forest floor. And obviously the forest is up and down all over the place. And just ahead of me, again, this was before Christmas, but the leaves were autumn colours, browns, all that. And it was actually a sunny day. And I'm driving along. I know you got the canopy of the woods and that above you, sort of thing, because as you drive down the road, that's where the trees do meet, but there was a lot of light coming through. And I'm just driving along, and in my peripheral vision, as I'm looking straight, at the corner of my eye, I saw a white flash, right? And I immediately thought, being a driver and driving a lot, you often get like polythene bags, that sort of thing, blow out in front of you, that sort of shit. So I've seen it at the corner of my eye and recognized it straight away as a bag. That's what I thought. Yeah. And so obviously clocking it, I'm like, I need to know a bit more about this, where it's going. So then my focus is on it, and it may be, I don't know, maybe at this point it was maybe 100 yards up the road from me, something like that. And when I looked to where I thought this was, I didn't initially see it. Right. And I thought, well, that's strange. And then my eyes lowered, and as I was driving towards it, my eyes lowered, and I see this thing just sat there, and it was hunched up. I don't want to say curled up, I'm going to say hunched up. Do you know where the arms come in? Yeah. You've seen an animal where it does that, and it's sort of cowering down, and its head's turned to the side, like not a dog, because obviously the dog's feet are on the ground. Its front feet, if that's what you call them, there's actually more like hands. They were actually tucked under it, and it was sort of cowering down. Have you ever seen Pan? From mythology. Yeah, that's what that depiction of him doing that. That's exactly what this was doing, but it was much bigger than that, what you'd expect to see, because this thing was squatted down and it was cowering like this, and the thighs on this thing must have been, I would say, at the top of the thigh, you're talking at least a foot across, maybe a bit more. They were huge. The only animal you could sort of, I mean, mountain goat comes to mind, obviously, a mountain goat, or maybe a kangaroo, with a width for the rear legs compared to the front, if you know what I mean. But again, the hands were killed in, but I would say there was hands more than feet, because they were small, not like a T-Rex, but they were small, clearly smaller than the legs. I mean, I see the body briefly, but then I locked eyes with it, and as soon as I locked eyes with it, I couldn't take my eyes away from it, because the eyes were very much goat-like, and I can see where that that goat man thing comes in. They were very much goat-like. There was on the side of its head, and they were red, like an albino rabbit. Yeah, they weren't glowing. They was just red. Again, this is daylight, and it had a mop of hair over the front of its face. It had a long snout, and I would say it was more like similar to a goat, but it was more broad than a goat. Had more about it, more like a horse, if you like. Yeah, I get what you mean. Maybe not as wide at the front. It did taper, but not drastically. And the front of its muzzle, if that's what you call it, there was it was white, right? So predominantly the thing was white. Okay, it had spots of it were grey fur. Like I don't know if you've ever seen a grey pony, like a fluffy pony. It was that that colour, but predominantly it was grey. It was white, and then it had these grey patches. But its face was white. But at the front here, it had on its top lip and bottom of its chin, it was black, like black fur. And I don't know if that's because it's been rooting around in the ground,
Possibly.
or if it was naturally that colour. But I've since seen pictures of like some sort of reindeer. And because I was trying to think of things what it could be, and I looked at a picture of this reindeer, which was actually grey, but it had a similar marking on the front of its thing. So I don't know if there's a reason they have them markings, probably for predator protection or something. I don't know. Break like a camouflage thing. I don't know why. I didn't look into it, but I see there's a picture of a reindeer with this thing. So this had it. So its body was covered in this. I'm going to say fur because it probably was, but it was, I would say, at least 4 inches long. Right. It was long fur, and it was really heavily furred. Again, like I say about people calling it a sheep man.
Yeah.
It's very similar to when a sheep's got its full wool on. Not so much matted. I didn't see many mats on it. From what I recall, I mean, it's possible, but I didn't see it. Looked quite well kept, to be fair. Yeah. The only thing I get from, I mean, obviously the fur, like I say, was real thick and say like a sheep. That's the best way to describe it. So it's kind of all three in one. It didn't have horns, okay. It did have ear rolls that sort of jutted out. Remember, it had like a big mop of hair on it, but it did have ear rolls that sticked out. Not massive things like you'd expect, just enough. And it was cowering, and I got, and I don't know if I'm making this up or if this is what it was trying to convey to me, but I got the impression that it was ill or injured.
Yeah.
But again, that could just be it just could be nonsense. But that's the impression I got. The way it was cowering, the way it was looking at me, never took its eyes from me. I don't think it expected me to see it. But I'm positive it did expect me to see it. I think the movement of it, what I initially thought was that carrier bag or that polythene bag that was going to blow across. I think that was it squatting down.
Yeah. Yeah, you've spotted that.
And it had done that way in the distance when it squatted down. And I think just being a professional driver and that peripheral vision that you just use. I think that was in his. I think in a normal day, maybe you probably just drive past that. I wouldn't have even noticed it. You certainly wouldn't. If you didn't notice it squatting down, you wouldn't have noticed it sat in the ground. Even though it was very distinctive because it was white against this orange and brown background. But yeah, I mean that was it. It was a brief thing. Again, when I speak to people around my neck of the woods that have seen this thing, they always say it's a deer man, and it's always brown. Interestingly, no one's ever said to me, and I've never asked the question because I don't like to lead the witness anyway. But I've never had anybody say to me that it had a shaggy coat.
Right, so it's always just been sleek.
It's always been sleek, just like a deer. Yeah. So, I mean, that's interesting in itself. I've had this, and this was in Hampshire, so wherever that is, it's about 150 miles from where I live. So,
right.
So it's not that it's nowhere in the area that I normally be. It's just a million to one chance sort of thing. Again, the weird thing is, and this is the weird thing. I mean, it's all weird, but this is the really weird thing: is that I've got a camera in the van.
Yeah.
I've got a phone, which was right next to me. And at no point did I think, stop. At the end of the road, I thought, stop and go back. But then I convinced myself it'd be gone.
Yeah.
And I carried on with what I should be doing, what I was there to do. Never went back. And my brain, for that first initial 30, 40 seconds after I saw it, it was like a movie, just going through all these different things that it was. Like, it showed me a deer, it showed me a pony. Yeah. I remember seeing pony. I remember seeing all these things, and it was trying to convince me. And I presume this is just a natural human reaction. I don't think
it was the same for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it was this, it was that, and I was saying no, it won't. No. And then the other image came, and by the time this had all happened, I know it sounds surreal, but by the time this had all happened, I was a ways down the road, and then I convinced myself it'd be gone if I turned around, and it probably wouldn't. I don't know, but I never went back, and that's ridiculous.
No, No, I don't think it is ridiculous. You don't get time to think. I know that's one of my things of being a fellow witness. People say, why didn't you this? Why didn't you that? I didn't think. I pushed my friend to the floor and I ran. I thought he was going to get me.
Mm.
And now I think, oh, Debbie, you should have run back. But there wasn't a conscious thought. It was terrifying. And I get what you mean about the movement. If that thing that I saw had stayed completely still, I wouldn't have known it was there.
You just walk straight past it, yeah.
I just wouldn't have known. It was just the movement of it within the
You
shadow.
you get that from a lot of witnesses where they say, when they initially saw it, it looked like a tree stump, or it looked like this, or is that, until it moved. And obviously our eyes are designed to look at movement, side movement in a sort of vertical world. So we do need that movement. That's how camouflage works on most animals. When it stays still, like you see fish that lay on the seabed, whatever, chameleon even. But if they don't move, you don't see them.
That's it. That's exactly it. Your eye tunes into it, isn't it? I've had a few reports, Lee, from the UK where not the same creature at all, but a kind of similar circumstances in the fact that each of the witnesses described it as being sickly or ill in some way. And they felt like it made itself known to them because it felt sickly or ill in some way. And each and every one of them said, I just didn't know what to do. I just went home. How would you know?
I mean, that's interesting that other people have reported that as well. So that makes me want. Wish I had done more, because that was the one thing that bothered me after it. It was like, not that I'd seen. I mean, that was 1 in a million chance, but it was that feeling, and I was trying to. I don't know where that came from.
They could tune into him.
I do believe that is entirely possible, and I wonder if it's a genetic thing, because with the, like you say, the fae, the grey folks, what I call them, and the fairy folk, if you want to go that far, but I wonder if that is something to do with genetics, because it tends to be people with an Irish heritage, a Scottish heritage, those sorts of things, a Gaelic heritage, if you like. They tend to be the people who see these things. Now, whether that's just because of location, obviously that could be a thing. But when I saw what I saw, I was in England. Yeah, well, there you go. Well, how many times do you get people who are clairvoyant, and then the mother was clairvoyant, or so. You could easily say, well, it's just a learned experience, that sort of thing. But when you're seeing things, I think that's different. My kids have seen things, and I never say to them, no, you didn't see it. You know what I mean? I say, tell them what you saw, explain what you saw, and then I try and explain as best as I can, because no one's an expert on any of this. But I try and explain as best as I can what I think they saw, what it possibly wants, that kind of thing. But they seem to just accept it. There was one, just quickly, I know we've got other things to talk about, but there was one occasion there where they asked me why I came in the bedroom that night. And, you've heard this again, but, and I said, I didn't pop in. They said, you were stood in the doorway. He was watching you, and it was obviously some sort of shadow person, and then I explained to them what they were, and that they observe as well as sleeping for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But they are part of this world, and I don't think there's much we can do about it. You know what I mean?
I needed that. When I was a kid, I needed that. What you did for your kids there is worth more than gold. If somebody had said to me, Debbie, it's okay, it's just part of the world, people see them, I think I would have had a very different upbringing.
Yeah.
So I was convinced that I was crackers, because my parents said I was crackers, so you think, oh my God, it just must be me. So I went kind of quiet and into my shell. If I'd have had a dad like you who went, no, people do, I don't know why it happens, but it happens, I think that'd have been massive for me.
I think the taboo on a lot of this stuff has been broken. I mean, obviously we look at Bigfoot, those sorts of things, and that taboo's been massively broken. You could say finding Bigfoot, those sorts of things help like that, but there is a lot more people willing to talk about these things. Interestingly enough, I mean, the black cat, the black cat that we get in the UK, which shouldn't exist. We know that it's melanistic cats don't naturally exist in the wild. They're very rare, and every cat we see in the UK is black cat. Whether this is some sort of domestic creature that we haven't caught up with yet. But those sorts of things where people are more willing to come forward with that, even that the taboo for that sort of thing has been broken. And I can't give you a figure, but there's lots of people who've seen these things.
Yeah.
Who have been sort of hiding in the shadows and that. But when you mention it, they say, "Oh, I've seen that," or "So and so's seen that." And there are more out there than what we even give credit for them. Before you go into the the supernatural and the the more stranger creatures that we probably will touch on.
I mean, I've got to agree. I take the majority of cat reports. I take a black. And if you look at the newspapers at the moment, every week there's a new cat story.
Don't naturally occur in the wild. Well, no. They do, but very, very rare, So what are we looking at here? Is this a supernatural being, or is this a cat that we haven't caught up with? Is it a native species that we just don't that we haven't caught up with? There could be, many different. And we have lynx and things like that, don't we? We do have, biggish four-legged creatures. So maybe this is some sort of hybrid. But whatever it is, it's there, and it's quite numerous.
We stopped talking about large cats here, but we carried on the conversation about driving on the road and the things that people see. Lee actually discovered 2 deer legs left in the middle of the road, and I asked him about that road, and he went on to explain that he had taken a number of reports from local people who'd also experienced strange things.
I've had a few people that have seen crossings there. I've even had one guy who I know, quite well. I know this guy's salt of the earth, but he's actually seen a wolf there. Well, a wolf. I mean, come on. But there was 3 other witnesses. So,
right.
As it were, they were working on some trees in the area. They were actually stationed as this wolf walked under them. They was actually up the tree.
Yeah.
So they were looking down, and this thing walked between them. And I watched it go across the field and lay down on the other side of the field. They could see it from where they were, and it was grey. It was a wolf. I mean, we don't have wolves in England. Well, we did, but we don't now. But this is just up the road from where I am, and it's very close, Great Limber, very close to that A18. So
it was at this point that Lee asked me if I wanted to know about his experiences with the fairy folk, and I did, because I think it might tie in to the creature that he saw, the sheep squatch, the pan-like creature. I think there may be a connection there.
The first one I saw, so I've seen 2, and I can't remember which way round they occurred, but I think the first one was possibly just a really brief encounter. It was something run across the living room floor. We did have cats at the time. We were small children at the time, and we did have cats. Something run across the living room floor. We went to investigate, and there was my mum had brasses, like like the old horse. What do you call them? I can't remember what you call them.
Yeah, the horse brasses. Exactly what they are.
That's what they're called, didn't it? Yeah, she had those sorts of things hanging up, and she maybe had some other little ornaments around the fireplace that were brass, that kind of stuff. And for whatever reason, people did that in them days, didn't they? And this creature had run across the fireplace and was picking up one of these objects and looking at it.
Right.
I don't know why. And anyway, we run in, and it to all intents and purposes, it looked like if I said goblin, that'd be. I think most people would be able to picture what this is, like a bald goblin, grey skin. Again, we're talking about being the grey folk and things like this. And again, incidentally, nowadays we call them maybe aliens or something. I don't know. Maybe that ties in. But this was only short. I mean, this was probably maybe not even 30 centimeters high. It's very small. And it was just looking at this brass object. We came in the room behind it, and then when it clocked us that we were there, it looked at us and then just took off across the side of the room. It hid behind a chair in the corner, and we climbed up over the chair to look over the top, and it sort of looked up at us and then just blinked out. Never seen it again there, not that one anyway. I saw something which I think was probably a fairy as well, but that was a one-time shot sort of thing. Again, I don't know if that was the first one I saw or the second one.
Yeah, which way around?
They were probably very similar in time frame, though. Maybe even within a year apart, something like that. But the other one that I saw, because I remember being probably about 13-year-old, and I must have been the same age in this, and It was summer holidays. And, the brief version of this is I came downstairs. I remember all my focus was on about getting out with my mates. We'd planned to do a water fight, all that sort of stuff. We had the water balloons ready and all that. And that was all I wanted to do. So I come downstairs, have my cereal, and I was about to run outside and meet my mates on the corner. So that was the plan. Anyway, as I'm running past the door, which we call the cubbyhole, but it's basically the door under the stairs. And this was a full length door. It was in the back of the stairs. And it was rattling. Now, it's an internal door. There's no reason for this to be rattling, other than maybe there's an animal in there. And I think, like I say, we had cats at the time. So possibly I was thinking the cat had got in there somehow. So I opened the door, and in the door, and I'm not going to say to my amazement, because I wasn't amazed, which is really weird, right? But there was a kid in there about my age, and he was dressed in a hood and a cloak. If you've ever seen Fantasia, the Mickey Mouse thing, that's the sort of thing that came to mind when I saw him. But I can't remember which way around it was. It was either purple with yellow, like stars or moons or whatever, or the other way around. But it was those colours. And again, he's just wearing his cloak and he's in there. And I remember we had a little brief conversation. He asked me what I was up to that day. And again, none of this is strange. That is really weird. But none of this is, seems strange at all. So we're talking. He's asked me what about I was doing. I told him. I said, I've got to go. Told him I meet him. And that was it. Shut the door and off I went. And this happened for maybe the next 2 or 3 days. And we had, say, quite cordial conversations. No issue. And then maybe the 4th day, that's when things changed. And I opened the door. The door was rattling. I opened the door. He's there. We have a brief conversation. And then at this point, he hands me a test tube. The easiest way to describe this thing is a test tube. But it basically was a glass vial with a clear liquid in it. No stopper or anything. It was just open. And he said, I've got you a drink. Or I've got you a present or whatever he said. And I said, no, you're all right, you know what I mean? And then we was talking, and he offered me it again. I said, no, honestly, you're all right, I don't need it, I'm not interested. And so we talked a bit more, and he offered me it again. And each time he offered me, he got more and more forceful with it. And I said, look, I don't need it, I'm not interested. I don't want your drink, you know what I mean? So he got, like I say, really angry at this point, and he sort of leaned in at me and, you will drink it. You need to drink it and all this. And if you don't drink it, bad things will happen to you, all that stuff. And I'm like, I'm getting a bit worried now. I'm like, no. And I think in my head, the illusion, the spell that he was putting on me, if that's what you want to call it, started to slip then. And his disguise started to slip at the same time. And that's when I recognized him as a, like I say, goblin or a gremlin. If you remember the movie Gremlins, this is kind of what I'm looking at. Didn't have the ears, it had the human ears, but essentially that's what I'm looking at here.
Yeah.
And again, it's grey, not green. And its teeth and everything. And it's, again, it didn't have spiky teeth, it had human teeth. It's basically a real miniature human being. That's kind of what it looked like, but grey skin. No hair. It might have had the odd little hair, like you see on like a pork scratching of a pig,
Yeah.
It kind of, that skin would be sort of what it had. But anyway, his disguise started to slip and he got really violent. And at that point, I shut the door, and I remember the door violently shaking for what felt like forever, but it's probably only 30, 40 seconds. And then it stopped, and I went on about my day. And it might have been years later. Maybe I was watching a TV program or reading a book, or I can't remember how it came about now, but years later, I remembered the experience, but I didn't remember it at the time. That's happened to me before with a UFO, so I don't know if that's the brain doing that. Yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of what happened. And again, that happened at the same house, but that's it. Nothing else has ever happened there. No one else has ever seen anything like that there. Other than, like I say, the first one where there was 2 people witnessed that. But other than that, no one else has ever reported anything like that. And I've never seen anything like that again.
Strength of will got you out of that. If you just drank that drink, you never eat or drink in the fairy realm, ever.
Well, that's the thing, innit? Because this is like, maybe we was doing like research years later or something like that. And or maybe I saw a story, and I think it was about that, where they said, these creatures in legend, they make a noise in the forest. You go and observe. Sometimes it's a crying baby, sometimes it's music. And you'll follow them into the forest, and you'll see this beautiful banquet laid out in front of you, and they'll say, "Come and join us." And you see this banquet, and you take of it, and as soon as you eat, it turns back to mud and bugs and bark, and that's what they've made this banquet of. But to your mind, it looks like a beautiful feast, and they actually call that, back in the day, they actually called the magic that they use glamour, and that's kind of where we get the word glamorous.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing to you. They glamorise. So
yeah, that's what they do. Yeah, and
it'll appear in its softest way that it can to entice you.
Yeah, and people will take from that. And obviously, as we know, the story goes that if you eat from the fairy kingdom or drink from the fairy cup, you become a fairy. And I'm not quite sure how you get back, but I know people sometimes reappear, don't they? So, but yeah, no, I didn't take it.
Strength of will. Honestly, the only way I know that people can overcome it is literal strength of will. And you've had the fortitude to do that. You said no several times. They can't put anything on you that you don't invite. So
no, this did feel like I had certain free will. Definitely.
What worries me about that though, Lee, is the fact that you weren't surprised by seeing him.
No, that's the weirdest thing, isn't it? That this, and again, I should point out for people who obviously nobody knows, but the actual cubbyhole I'm talking about now, although you could stand in it as it's under the stairs, is a full length door, so you can stand in there. The difficulty being though that the actual ground level was there was so many bits of debris in there, like my dad's fishing tackle box. There was the Hoover in there. There was all sorts of things that you couldn't physically stand in there. So what I was seeing was a boy, but it was from the waist up, if you like, which again never registered until years later when I reimagined it, and I thought, whoa, that couldn't have happened, couldn't have been stood there, sort of thing. And that's when it sort of fell into place that the whole thing was some sort of a spell, I would say. I don't know I didn't know what you want to call it, but there was something happening there that he had a lot more control over this reality than what I've got. Let's put it like that.
Yeah,
but I've spoke to people who actually saw two of these. Basically, how can I describe it? They said, like you might roll a picnic blanket up.
Yeah.
Right. So they saw two of these, and they basically rolled a picnic blanket. They had a rolled picnic blanket, and they sort of unrolled it, and it became like a doorway, and they went through it, and then just dropped it, and they're gone. And that's when some people seen them and they're gone. There was another guy that saw, he went, I think it was a graveyard he was in, incidentally. I know that's quite popular for these sorts of weird things, but he saw two of these wrestling over a piece of litter, as far as I can remember. It might have been a Coke can or something like that. And there was two of them, these little goblin-type creatures, wrestling over this Coke can. And there was a third one sort of leant back against the wall, sort of arms folded, watching these two carry on. And it was that one that clocked him looking at him. And as soon as he clocked him, he sort of made a noise to the other two. And then they all blinked out together. Boom, boom. The can just fell.
It's happening for my grandson. He's 10 at the minute. And we were talking the other day because he said, do you remember that gnome I saw now when I was little? I said, I do, son. He wouldn't talk about it at the time. So I said to him, back then, he was so frightened of it, I had to go in and clear his room out and everything. And he just said he'd first, when you first put them on the internet, and they have that like blue tablet and they go on all the baby games and stuff, it had a camera on it. And he was just randomly clicking, and through the camera he saw at the end of his bed, he calls him the button-eyed gnome. He said he was this little horrible man, but he had buttons for eyes. And he said, but he wasn't on the other photographs now. And I just said to him, next time if you see him, you say, out of my room now. And, you've not got permission. So in the end, I had to make him like a besom. I had to make him like something to symbolise the fact that it was his room and he was in charge of his room, to kind of shut. Yeah. And I know for a fact when he's 13 or 14, it'll ramp up again, because it tends to do for boys. So I'm thinking maybe you've had some experiences in your very early days that are locked off somehow or are being kept from you somehow.
It's quite possible, yeah. I mean, it's strange when, I don't know if you want me to go into the UFO, but it's a similar thing with that, it's strange when you get a memory back that's obviously been there the whole time and you can't remember it at all. It's a really weird feeling, but that the same And again, there could be things in there. I actually tried regression.
Yeah, I have.
After the UFO thing, I tried regression with a German hypnotist and that, and I just couldn't do it.
You're too strong-willed. You're far too strong-willed. Yeah, you're not.
It just didn't work, and it's a real shame, because I would have liked to have done it. I might try it again, but yeah, I just couldn't do it, and I was really trying my hardest to because I wanted to know, but I just couldn't do it. But anyway, but that came after seeing this thing again. So when the story for this is essentially there was 3 of us, me and a couple of mates, and we'd gone down to the park, what we call a park, but it used to be a graveyard. Ainsley Street Park in Grimsby. It used to be a graveyard, and it used to flood, and a lot of apparently it was where the local prostitutes used to hang out and all that. So it had a bit notorious thing anyway.
Yeah.
But the reason they moved it is because it used to flood. That's the reason they give. But essentially, the bodies would basically exhume themselves. So they moved them, and actually, incidentally, it's flooded now. It's formed a pond there. So but it is an old graveyard. You can still walk around. You can still see some remnants of the graves there. But they did move all the bodies and put them in concentrated ground. So it's basically a park now. It's not massive by any means, but we were there, and the idea was there was a fence between the park and an office block, and the idea being that we was going to dig a hole under this fence, so an easy escape route, because we used to play games with these kids and that. And again, we're probably 14 to 15-year-old at this point, something like that. So anyway, we're digging this hole, and we didn't bring anything with us, shovels out like that, so we're doing it by hand, and it was really tough going. So my brother at the time, he was like, I'm not doing this, this not my thing.
Not fun anymore.
No. So he leant back on a tree. There's like a little small tree there, and he just leant back on it, and he's just looking at the stars. Anyway, we'd probably dig for maybe another 5-10 minutes, and he said to us, "Hey, look at this star. It's really big." And we looked, and the easiest way I can describe it is if you held a 2-penny piece at arm's length, right? That's the moon. If you hold a 5p at arm's length for a penny, that's about the size of this star. So it's huge, compared to what you expect to see. And the rest of the stars in the night, they're pinpricks. Anyway, we looked at it, and you see like these odd things every now and then. You might see a planet or something like that, and it's particularly big, and which I just said, well, it's probably a planet. Anyway, you just said, yeah, maybe. So we carried on digging, and he carried on watching this, and maybe another 10 minutes went past, and he says that star's moving. Anyway, I was like, can't be. So we stopped what we was doing. I remember we was all stood in line, we was watching this star, and if you kept your eye on it, you really do have to keep your eye on it, but it was moving so slowly, and the only reason you could really see it was moving is because it was moving the direction where the moon was, so the gap was getting smaller.
Yeah.
I think if it had been a clear night with no moon, I don't know if you'd be able to register that it was actually moving. But anyway, it was moving, and I remember turning to him going, yeah, you're right, that is moving. And a blink of an eye, it was just like a quick like that, and it was a craft above us, and it was 2 overlapping circles, was directly underneath it, right? It couldn't have been any more over us if it had tried, and it was 2 overlapping circles, and it made no noise. There was no lights on it or anything like that, and it was just there, and it was probably at this point, I think a lot of the trees are 40 foot, this was probably maximum of 80 foot above us, and it was probably 100 feet wide. Now, I've been under the Vulcan bomber, and I've been under a Chinook helicopter, and we're talking about that size, okay?
Right.
So that's what we're looking at here, and again, it was there, and we all sort of looked at each other and say, what's this, you know what I mean? And with that, there was a guy walking 2 or 3 German shepherds across the park, and somebody shouted to him, "Hey, mister, what's that?" And he looked up, and as soon as he seen it, he just took off running. So at that point, we was like, well, if he's running, we're running.
Yeah.
There was no jeopardy. I always say this, but there was no jeopardy. There was no feeling of fear. There was no feeling of anything, really, other than just curiosity. But as soon as he took off running, we just run. And this thing moved away, and eventually it went back to a star in the night sky. I remember running home. Me and my brother went one way. Our friend carried on straight up, and we never talked about it. Maybe, I don't know, 10 years later. So maybe I'm 25, something like that. I'm watching a program just by chance, I'm watching a program on the paranormal that particular night, and again, it wasn't something I was into at all.
Yeah.
It was just the thing that I was on, and he showed this. I still remember it was Rich Planet TV is what the program was, and he had this old lady on there. I think it was in Wales, and she drove up to a set of traffic lights. So I'm watching it, and she drives up to a set of traffic lights, and she's describing seeing this star in the sky. And before the traffic lights had changed, this star had changed into a dumbbell-shaped craft, is what she described. Right. And then she was walking, and she was looking around to say, anybody else seeing this? And I can't remember if it blinked out or I can't remember how it finished, but when that came on the telly, that memory came, what I've just told you, that came back. So that was, I did not remember that at all. If someone had said to me the day before, have you ever seen a UFO? I'd have said no.
It's quite common. It's quite common.
Until this, and it came back. So obviously I rewound the program. I asked my brother to come over, didn't tell him why, put the program on, let him watch it. And as soon as he finished watching it, he turned to me and said, that's what we saw. So he remembered. And then he started filling in certain details that I'd forgot. Like underneath, for instance, do you remember the old film reels that you used to see with the hole put out? That's kind of what the bottom of this looked like. Right. And when embossed, I don't know, I can't tell, but there was definitely 4 or 5 holes in this on both sides of this, because it's basically 2 overlapping circles, like a figure 8. That's what the shape was. And again, this old lady said what she saw looked like a dumbbell. Now from the side, that's probably what this looked like, but we was down. But the weirdest thing about it, obviously, is the memory being blanked almost. Yeah, that's weird. Yeah. But the fact we was looking at it when it showed itself, to me, and I could be totally backing up the wrong tree, and I'm willing to accept that. But for me, I would say that thing had consciousness. Yeah. Whether it was the craft, as I'm calling it, craft,
yeah,
or whatever was, on board. I don't know if there's anything on board. It could have been some probe-like vessel. I don't know, or it could have been alive itself. It could have been.
Yeah.
I don't know, but whatever it was seemed to read our thoughts, which to me, well beyond human at this point. I'm not saying we can't do that. I mean, it's quite possible that we've got this technology, but at that point, what we're working now, like 20 years ago, whether it was, maybe not that much, but 20 odd years ago, but 15 years ago, but it's I don't know. To me, that's the weirdest thing. The fact that, do you think it just showed itself to us, or do you think it was just going to pop there anyway, and we just happened to be there after looking at it? That it sounds like a coincidence. Then I think it showed itself to us, and I think it read what we was thinking. And
it definitely had curiosity in you, because it came down close enough to really study her. And there must have been something frightening about it, Lee, for the man to run. Grown adult, his leg anti, so maybe it's appeared to you in a softer way than it's appeared to him. Clearly terrified him, hasn't it?
I think the fact that it was so close to us, that bloke was walking across the field, minding his own business, and it was that close to us. I just think when he looked up and see that there, he just
shocked.
Because he just literally turned, and he couldn't run any faster. The dogs didn't react at all. But again, there was no noise. The only thing it had to it was like a shimmer to it, which is similar to, it might have had a static to it. Like you were crackling like a static. It could have had that. That could have been, from the dampness in the air. Sometimes you get that. But I would say it had a shimmer to it, which is not unlike, when you drop oil on water.
Yeah, I get you. Like rainbow.
Those different colors. That's kind of what the shimmer was. But that wasn't lights. There was no lights on it.
No, so some people believe that they're not cloaked in a way as we see cloak as magical. It's more that whatever it is reflecting back its surroundings. So it isn't moving through their invisible air, but because it's reflecting what's around it, it looks to us, and it's the movement that most people catch. No, I don't think it was an accident, Lee. And because if it's that intelligent, you wouldn't have seen it. I say it to people who see cryptids. I say, well, I don't understand why. Why didn't it just not wait 10 seconds, and then you wouldn't have seen it? Yeah, and you wouldn't have come I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
I've thought about that because I wonder if they see the vehicle as they don't understand necessarily the vehicle is like they see the vehicle as a creature itself, and I wonder if it's just got that close to them that they think, well, I can see it, it's probably seeing me, so crack on, do you know what I mean? That sort of thing. Or whether they deliberately do it because they want to be seen every now and again. Maybe it's a game to them. I know, like the Dogman, when people see Dogman or werewolf, whatever you want to call it, I know that tends to want to leave an impression on people for whatever reason.
It's Volcanic Chase, and it's very similar to your account. He called it. He said it was like a hyena, but upright on two legs. Had this grey, different coloured grey, sickly-looking animal with patches looking out of its fur. Looked at him through car windscreen. He said it had yellow eyes. Well, and then another girl was in. I'm going to say south east because I can't remember the exact name of the town. She's walking across the golf course, coming home from school, daytime, about 4:30. Sees this thing that she didn't know whether it was a cat, a dog, or a wolf, but it was upright on two legs, and it looked sickly and ill, and it had yellow eyes. And she felt like, she said, I don't know how I knew, but I knew it was ill, and I knew it was there. And what was strange was when she was a little girl, she said every night when I was little, my dad had to come into the room because I could see a wolf at the end of my bed. And my dad had come in with like an imaginary leash, put the lead on the dog and walk it out, and then she could go to sleep. And she said that happened until she was in
that sort of that lingering, that sort of showing itself, whether at the window or in your dreams or like say it actually present in the room, that does come up from time to time. And again, if I've taken 10 reports of, and I never lead the witness, I just let the witness say what they want to say. And if they tell me it's got fear, it's got fear. If they tell me it hasn't got fear, it hasn't got fear.
Yeah.
But I would say out of the 10, let's say I've taken 10 reports of a werewolf type creature, I would say 4 of them at least, the people have said it had no fear. It was just like a battleship grey skin, and it might have had like clumps of hair, like say, like people say mangy dog, that sort of thing. But it's not. Like you see the Hollywood version of the creature, and it's so like it's got a mane and it's got all that stuff. This is not what people are seeing. This is, and again, if people are just making this up or basing it on what they've seen in pictures or movies, but they never report that. It's not that they're seeing it, and it's not a person. Like we used to think in the old days, these people couldn't explain it, so they thought that people were turning into werewolves. That's the thing, and you can understand that, and that makes more sense if you think about what the people were reporting back then. It was just a humanish body with no fear. Again, that would make more sense. But these people very rarely report fear, which is weird.
I did speak to a father and son, and they were in Scotland, and they saw something that he definitely described as having sheep's wool, and strangely, kind of seen it jumping a boundary.
Yeah,
but that it was definitely like sheep's wool. Everybody, it wasn't a sheep. There was no way it was a sheep.
Interesting. Just on that point where you say, the way it moved or hopped over, I think, when people see this and the reports I've had, it always moves off like a kangaroo, that bounding motion, which is very different from the dogman or the wild man. They tend to move with a gliding motion. No undulation, but these things tend to really have a bound to them. And I think that if you saw it from a distance, that'd be the only way to tell the difference at that point.
The descriptions are so different, aren't they, that come in? I'm like you now. I normally ask the witness, what do you think it was that you saw? What name did you give to it? She's like, well, I'd probably ask you that. What name did you give to the creature that you saw that day? What is he in?
Again, like I said, it's got elements of all three. It could say sheep man, you could easily say deer man, although only the face was really deerish, if you like. But I could understand how people might say that. To be honest, sheep man would be the closest, the fear on it and all the rest. But again, if you ask me about mythology, things like that, then Pan, I think they call it the fawn.
That was my first thought. When you got in touch with me, I thought it's probably like what I would class as pan, like
but without the horns.
Yeah, without the horns, kind of thing.
I didn't see horns, but again, it really did have a really thick mop of hair on top of its head. You know, if there was anything tiny things in there, it's possible, but I didn't see anything like that. Legs, you know, I remember the legs. I remember seeing the legs first, and then I didn't go down. I came up and made contact with its eyes, and then I couldn't take my eyes off its eyes because it was so strange. But I never saw its feet. Do you know what I mean? So I never saw if it had like human feet, hooves. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I never saw its feet. Again, they would be in the ground, so it might be difficult to see anyway. But I never saw its feet, so that's a bit of a shame. And you know, obviously the way it was facing me, its body was towards me, its head was towards me, so I never saw its tail, if it had a tail.
I don't know what the creature was that Lee saw that night, but I'm incredibly grateful that he shared it with us. I really enjoyed chatting with Lee. It was wonderful just to chat with somebody who understood what it's like to see the impossible. And I know there are lots of you out there, and I think you'll also enjoy Lee's podcast. It's a supernatural podcast, and you'll find a link to it below. So pop across and have a listen. I'm sure you'll find some topics that you're interested in. I will be back next week as always, and if you'd like some exclusive videos that you don't see on YouTube very often, pop across to my Patreon over there and you'll find new videos and articles and press releases and all kinds of things. So as I say, I'll be back with you all next week. Thank you for tuning in. Good night, everyone.